Hi, fifth graders. Welcome to week 1 of library through distance learning on this YouTube channel. So as you know, this is how we're going to be doing library for the weeks that follow and all your other classes as well. If you are a 4th or 3rd grader, you are also welcome to read along, even though this is labeled for 5th grade. That's fine also. As you know, 5th graders, I don't see all of you, so even if the ones that I don't see, this is for all 5th graders at CIS. So, and like I said, also 4th and 3rd as well. I know that when we were in the library before as 5th graders, a lot of times we spent library visit doing different activities, and then towards the before we were out, we were focusing more on reading AR books and taking tests, trying to meet our AR goals for the month. But this time I'm going to do something a little bit different since we're distance learning and we are under different circumstances at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read just some short stories just for entertainment. So these are not stories, or there's several stories coming out of one book, whereas if you were to read the entire book, then yeah, you could take an AR test on it, but this would be a really long read if I decided to read it to you, so we would be on here for hours, and I don't think that you want to spend that long listening to me read you a book. So I have a few books that I'm going to alternate between, and one of them is The Girl Who Helped Thunder and Other Native American Folktales. So this is coming out of a book that is a 5.0 reading level. And then I will also be reading from the compilation of Greek myths. So these are short stories compiled into one book, so I'll be alternating between Greek myths and the Native American folk tales. So what I like about these is they're short, they're entertaining, and they teach life lessons. So that's why I chose these. So if you want to come on here just to listen to a story for entertainment, that's awesome. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The first one that I'm going to read is called How Stories Came to Be. Now, a lot of times when we read Native American stories, they always sometimes talk about how things were created, like from things like from rocks. This one is going to be from a rock face, from water. Those things weren't created like that, we know, but it's just kind of a neat story, and how Native Americans used to always talk about how things were created from other things in nature, and that's something that they all have in common. If this is a folk tale, does anybody remember what genre that would be coming from? I'll give you a few seconds to say it to yourself. Okay, so if you said traditional literature, then you would be correct. And remember, traditional literature, how did it get started? If you said it was through the art of storytelling handed down from generation to generation, then that's correct. Remember, like I was saying in one of the other videos that I did for the other grades, they didn't have TV or phones or radio or anything like that a long time ago. I'm talking like thousands years ago. So they made up stories to tell to their family and friends, to entertain, teach life lessons, and that's how these stories came to be. And after a while, they were passed down, and somebody decided that they wanted to put them in a book so they could last forever. So like I said, this one is called How Stories Came to Be, and so you can kind of listen for the version of how this came to be. All right, once long ago there were no stories, and it made life hard for people. When the long nights of winter came, they sat around feeling bored and wishing that something interesting would be said. But all they heard was silence and an occasional sigh. Among them was a little boy who was known as Gaka. He was called by that name because his clothes were black with soot from the fire as the feathers of a crow. So Gaka means crow. He was an orphan and had no mother to wash and mend his ragged clothing, clean his face, or comb his hair, and people sometimes made fun of him because of his appearance, but usually he was ignored. And one day, as Gaka was returning home from hunting, he came to the place where a great cliff stood. Gaka was feeling weary and decided to rest for a bit. He put his bow and arrows down, sat, and leaned against the cliff beneath the place where the rocks formed a face like that of a man, and I'll go ahead and show it to you. So that's what that looks like. Ah, he sighed, if only there was something to which I might listen. Shall I tell a story? A deep voice asked. Gaka looked around. Who just spoke? He said. I did, said the deep voice. Gaka looked up, realizing it was the rock face who had spoken to him. He was greatly surprised, but also curious. I do not know what a story is, Gaka said, but whatever it is, I would like to hear it. First, you must give me something, said the stone face. I do so gladly, Gaka replied, placing some of the birds he had caught at the base of the cliff. Now, I shall tell a story, the great stone said, its deep voice seeming to come from the earth itself. But first you must answer my saying, Neo, to show that you are ready to hear. Neo, Gaka quickly replied. Good, said the great stone. Whenever I say, ha, you must answer, hen, so I may know you are listening, and you must not fall asleep until I have said, Deneho, and my story has come to an end. Then the great stone spoke a story of how the earth was made. Gaka listened closely so that he might remember the tale and share it to others. Finally, as it was getting dark, the story came to an end. Daneho, the great stone said, I have spoken. Gaka thanked the great stone and hurried back to the longhouse. As usual, the people were sitting around with nothing to do. No one looked up until he spoke, his voice louder and deeper than it had been before. Shall I tell a story? He asked. Who are you to speak? Said one of the people. Be quiet, the clan mother of the longhouse said to the man. Let this boy talk. I do not know what a story is, but it must be better than sitting about hearing nothing of interest. First, Gaka said, you must give me something. When a small pouch had been placed in his hand, Gaka told them that they must listen and respond, and then he repeated the tale that had been given to him by the great stone. The people all listened with rapt attention until at last he was done. That was wonderful, the people said. Tell us another. Daneho, Gaka said, I have spoken. My story has come to an end for this night. The next day, Gaka went back to the rock face. Grandfather, I have come to hear more, Gaka said, placing a string of clay beads on the ground. I have brought you this gift. Shall I tell a story? The great stone said. Neo, Gaka replied. And so it went. Gaka continued to return to the great stone for more tales to share with his people each night. And just as he gave gifts to the great stone, so the people gave gifts to him to show their appreciation for his stories. He was given new clothing, new moccasins, and a bone comb to straighten the tangles in his hair. And as he told his stories night after night, he also grew in size. He was no longer a small boy in dirty clothes, but a tall, well-dressed, good-looking man. The people no longer called him Gaka. His new name was Hagiato, the storyteller. Some tried to find out where he learned his stories, and they followed him and watched as he sat beneath the cliff. He seemed to be listening to something, but those who watched him heard nothing more than the word huh when he spoke every now and then. At last the day came when one who had been the boy Gakko came to the rock face one final time. Grandson, the father stone had said to Hagiato, the great teller of stories, I have shared with you all the stories I can. The stories no longer belong to the stones, but to the people. Now anyone who truly listens to the people may hear a story. And so it is to this day. Listen. All right, so most Native American folk tales teach lessons about life, and this one, I don't know, this one doesn't really seem to teach a lesson, but what it does tell us is that this little boy, he started out, he didn't have very much, grew up to be a really fine, handsome man who the people brought presents to, and he grew up to be more awesome than he was when he was little because of the rock face had told him all of these awesome stories. So one lesson we could learn from this is how important it is to listen, because when we do listen, we're able to share with others, and that way things get passed down, especially if they're good things. So that might be a lesson. If you can think of another lesson that you got out of this, I always enjoy listening to students tell me what they learned from these stories, because your perspective on what you learn is always different from mine, and it's interesting to listen to. If you can and you want to and you're allowed to, you could leave what you think you learned from this, if there was any lessons in it, in the comment section below. And if not, that's fine too. So I hope you enjoyed this story of how stories came to be, and I hope that you have a wonderful week, and continue to be awesome and try to learn something new every day, even if it's something small. So, all right, bye.